Hello there, folks. We've got another video for you. Today we're going to be talking about realistic dialogue. Dialogue is one of those things that separates good writing from bad writing. And if you pick up a book and the dialogue is flat, it becomes unreadable. So if there's one thing as a new writer you should really focus on, it's making sure your dialogue is good. It doesn't have to be the best dialogue in the world. It just has to be good. What I'm going to do in this video is give you a couple of things to focus on and then a really simple framework that you can use to double check and make sure that your dialogue is at least good, right? So the first thing that we're going to do is with every piece of dialogue, we're going to identify the purpose. People don't have conversations for no reason, right? There are a bunch of reasons that they have a conversation, and not all of those reasons are necessarily visible on the surface, right? People can have a conversation because they need to pass information. People can have a conversation because they feel nervous and they're trying to use talking to somebody to distract them. They can have a conversation because they're angry and they want to confront the person or create some sort of conflict with the person who they're talking to. They could be having conversation to pass the time because they're bored, right? There are all sorts of reasons that somebody might be striking up a conversation. But you want to know why your characters are talking. You don't need to have them talk if there's nothing to talk about, right? Just continuing to talk is one of the first signs of bad dialogue. When people should just cut the conversation short and move along into action, but instead it drags out, that's when books become unreadable. The second thing you want to pay attention to is the chemistry of your interaction, the way that the two people are interacting, right? Sometimes you have character A and character B, and they talk at each other, and they just speak. One person says something, and then the other person says something, and then the first person says something, and the second person says something, and it's flat as all get out. Listen, people don't talk like that. People don't make one point and then wait to hear the other point and then counter that point and talk back and forth in that way, right? No, people interrupt each other. People tease each other. People divert into other topics, right? Conversation isn't a really rigid and static thing. It's this constantly moving thing. And when you get two people who interact in an interesting way, you produce chemistry. You end up with a situation where 1 + 1 = 3 instead of just 2. And this actually leads into our third thing that you want to pay attention to, understanding your characters and your setting, right? Not all characters speak the same way, and not all settings are suitable for all kinds of conversations. If you are in the middle of a battle, you are not going to stop and let somebody monologue, unless their monologue is interrupted halfway through with an arrow through the eye. That's just not a setting in which a long conversation is going to be helpful. On the other hand, if you have two people who are sitting in a car and they just remain silent the entire trip, that's not very interesting. Instead, you can spice it up with a little bit of conversation. But again, understand not just your setting, but your characters as well. How do your characters interact with each other? What are the sorts of things that they're going to say to each other? How do they feel about each other? Is there, an antagonistic relationship? Is there tension between them? Is it positive tension? Is it negative tension? Right? We can decide all of these things ahead of time, and that's going to influence how our characters speak, and it's going to start to create some of that chemistry when they are well matched. If you have one character who is trying to be flirty and the other character is stonewalling them, just not interesting, right? It's not fun as a reader to read, even if that is what the characters are supposed to be like. Instead, if you have one character who is trying to stonewall and yet being drawn into flirtatiousness and quickly, going back and stonewalling again, that's fascinating, right? Seeing those cracks in the wall and seeing them start to engage and then quickly pull themselves back in or reel themselves back in, that's fascinating. And so you can create chemistry if you understand your characters well and they're in the correct setting for the kind of conversation that you want them to have. Now, in all of this, you want to focus on entertainment, right? The point is to make it more interesting. If you are just trying to deliver flat information, that's called an info dump, and it's not fun to read. You can deliver information. You can have somebody monologue. They can say, hey, this is a really important thing that everybody needs to know. It's context appropriate, right? The setting is right. The characters are right. And so I'm going to deliver half a page of information to everybody. But if you just have them blurt it out, it's not going to be very interesting. If instead they're interrupted at multiple points by people asking questions or poking the theory or saying, sorry, I have to go to the bathroom, anything to break it up, it's going to be more entertaining. And again, that's what you want to focus on. You want dialogue that's going to pull the reader through the story and make them interested in continuing to listen. As soon as your dialogue goes flat, you're going to lose your reader. And we don't want to do that. And I've alluded to this a little bit, but finally, pacing matters, right? The pacing of the scene in relation to the dialogue, the pacing of the information in relation to the scene, right? The way the characters deliberate and speak to each other, how vibrant or sedate the conversation is. All of these things matter, right? But you want to pay close attention to the pacing, and you want to make sure that the pacing fits with what you're trying to accomplish. Again, this goes back to the beginning. We want to identify the reason that they're talking in the first place, and then we want to pace it accordingly. These are some things that you can pay attention to that are going to improve your writing and help you master dialogue. But let's get to the framework. All right, so here is a simple 4-piece framework that's going to help you make sure that your dialogue is at least good, and then from there you can use these other principles to improve it. First and most importantly, nobody speaks for more than 4 sentences. Okay? Nobody. More than 4 sentences is a monologue. That is not dialogue. That is a monologue. That is one person speaking. Everybody else is listening. Dialogue is where there is an exchange of information. And so you want to make sure that nobody speaks for more than 4 sentences. More than that, each sentence should take a breath, and no more than a breath, right? You don't want it dragging on and 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 on, right? That's just not interesting. Again, that gets into monologue territory. But even more importantly, if somebody delivers 4 sentences, they're most likely going to be interrupted. Why? Because humans are self-centered and we like to speak more than we like to listen. But often it's actually because within 4 sentences, you should have been able to articulate a complete thought. And if you can articulate a complete thought, then you've given somebody something to respond to. And again, in a real-life conversation, you might speak for more than 4 sentences. And it might be completely appropriate that the other person listens to you intently. But that's not entertaining. Remember, we want to be entertaining. And so, in a book, in a story, nobody speaks for more than 4 sentences, and every sentence should be achievable in one breath. Those are framework pieces 1 and 2. And then, number 3, we're going to make sure that we cut our exclamation points. And actually, this is true for just punctuation in general. We don't want our punctuation to do the communication for us, right? So when somebody is reading, the words themselves should have impact. We don't need to add exclamation points. We don't need lots of punctuation to tell us what sort of emotion should be represented in the story or what sort of emotion is involved in this conversation, right? Make sure that you are not using too many exclamation points. Make sure that you are clearly communicating through the language and the body language that somebody is using instead of just relying on punctuation. Full disclosure, this is something that I pretty much failed at in my first book. My first couple of books, actually. I just used a lot of exclamation points because I thought it's exciting. When I could have used better language and I could have used physical motion, which leads us to actually the 4th piece of this whole framework, which is make sure that you are showing action instead of just using dialogue tags. You don't have to use dialogue tags for everything. You don't have to attribute every spoken word as long as you leave enough context clues for who is actually speaking. If someone stands up, slams their hand on the table, and then you have a really charged line, like an angry line, then people know, oh, the person who just slammed their hand on the table is probably the one speaking. As you practice this, you can get better and better and better at that. And all of a sudden, you're going to find that your dialogue not only flows more naturally, but it's more entertaining. It communicates the point in a clearer way, and that's exactly what you want. So just to review, we're going to make sure that nobody speaks for more than 4 sentences in a row, that every sentence can be said in a single breath, that we are letting our words speak for us and not relying on our punctuation to communicate the emotion. And then finally, we're going to show our actions instead of just attributing words via dialogue tags. If you can follow that framework, you're going to find that your dialogue gets better and better. But as always, this just takes practice. So if you want to improve your dialogue, the best thing that you can do is write more. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. Let me know if there are other things that you'd like me to do videos on in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one.